In January 2026, when the USS Abraham Lincoln and its entire carrier strike group rushed to the Persian Gulf to face Iran, military analysts in Beijing saw an opportunity. The Pacific was vulnerable. Or so they thought. What happened next would prove that the US Navy never ever leaves a gap undefended. And China's attempt to test it a costly mistake. For decades, the United States has maintained a delicate balance of power across two oceans. Carrier strike groups rotate between the Pacific and the Music Middle East, ensuring American dominance in both theaters. But in early 2026, that balance was tested like never before. The situation in the Persian Gulf had escalated. Iran's threats against shipping lanes had reached a boiling point. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea were intensifying. The Pentagon made a call. Deploy the USS Abraham Lincoln and its entire strike group to the region. The Lincoln, a Nimitz-class supercarrier carrying 90 aircraft, departed the Pacific along with one Ticonderoga-class cruiser, 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, multiple fast attack submarines. That's over 6,000 sailors, billions of dollars in military hardware, and an umbrella of air superiority. All heading west, and China noticed. For Chinese military strategists, this was a moment they had been waiting for. The Pacific Fleet's most combat-ready carrier group was suddenly thousands of miles away. The USS Ronald Reagan was in port for maintenance in Japan. The USS Theodore Roosevelt was still weeks away from its scheduled Pacific deployment. Military satellites over the South China Sea showed something the Pentagon had feared. Increased activity. Chinese naval vessels began conducting routine exercises in disputed waters. Fighter jets flew closer to Taiwan's air defense identification zone. And in the Philippine Sea, planned submarines began probing positions they hadn't dared approach in months. Beijing's calculation was simple. With the Lincoln gone, America's response time to any Pacific incident would be measured in weeks, not hours. They had done the math. They had studied the deployment schedules. What they hadn't studied was Plan B. What China's analysts failed to account for was a fundamental principle of American naval doctrine: redundancy. Even as the Lincoln steamed towards the Persian Gulf, the US Navy had quietly activated what some call the Pacific Shield Protocol. First, the USS Carl Vinson, which had been scheduled for training exercises near Hawaii, was redirected. Within 72 hours, a Nimitz-class carrier with 70 aircraft was positioning itself in the Western Pacific. Its movements classified, its presence unannounced. But that was just the beginning. What China didn't see on their satellites was what lurked beneath the surface. The US Navy's submarine force, arguably the most lethal branch of any military on Earth, had been quietly repositioning. Virginia-class fast attack submarines, each carrying Tomahawk cruise missiles and capable of tracking enemy vessels for weeks without detection, were already in the South China Sea. And then there was the wild card, the USS Ohio. The Ohio is a guided missile submarine. A vessel so large, so heavily armed that a single ship carries 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. More firepower than most countries possess. Music. When Chinese naval vessels began their exercises, they had no idea they were being launched from 400 feet below. On January 19, 2026, Chinese military planners decided to push further. A flotilla of planned vessels, including the Liaoning carrier group, began moving toward the Scarborough, disputed waters that the Philippines, a U.S. treaty ally, claims as its own. The move was calculated, provocative, designed to test America's response. Within 3 hours, something unexpected happened. A U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft appeared overhead, then another, then a third. The Chinese flotilla was being tracked in real time. But what came next sent a clear message. The USS Carl Vinson emerged from its position 600 m east, close enough to launch aircraft far enough to remain protected. Within hours, FA-18 Super Hornets were conducting routine operations in the area. But the real message came from below. A Virginia-class submarine surfaced deliberately within visual range of the Chinese destroyer Nanjing. Not to attack, not to threaten, just to be seen. The meaning was unmistakable. We know where you are. We've always known. And we're everywhere. Within 24 hours, the Chinese flotilla reversed course. The official statement from Beijing called it a successful completion of scheduled exercises. But satellite imagery told a different story. Ships returning to port far ahead of schedule. The Liaoning carrier group retreating to Hainan Island. Military analysts in Washington called it a miscalculation correction. China had bet that America was stretched too thin, that the Lincoln's departure had created an opportunity. Instead, they discovered something the US Navy has known for decades. There is no gap. Not in the Pacific, not in the Atlantic, not anywhere. The United States operates 11 aircraft carriers, but more importantly, It operates the world's largest submarine fleet, the most advanced maritime patrol aircraft, and a network of alliances that spans the globe. When one carrier leaves, another appears. When the surface fleet is elsewhere, the submarine force is watching. When an adversary thinks they found a weakness, they've already been seen. This incident, one that received almost no media coverage, reveals a fundamental truth about American naval power. The US doesn't defend the Pacific with a single carrier group. It defends it with a system. Satellites that track every vessel on Earth, submarines that can remain hidden for months, and a doctrine of deterrence built on one simple principle. We're always there, even when you think we're not. China learned this lesson in January 2026. The Pacific gap they thought they'd found was never a gap at all. It was a trap. And the USS Abraham Lincoln, it's still in the Persian Gulf, facing down Iran, knowing that the Pacific is covered. Because in the US Navy, there's no such thing as leaving the door unlocked. If you want to see how the USS Abraham Lincoln is handling the Iran threat right now, check out this video next. And if you haven't already, subscribe. We cover every major US Navy operation as it happens. Hit that bell so you don't miss the next one.